The colony lights burned low in the night. Metallic towers stretched into the dark sky, and neon lines flickered like veins of a dying giant. In the middle of this alien settlement, there was a cold stone chamber, a prison made for those who broke the laws. Inside that prison sat a young alien woman, chained to the wall, her hands trembling as she tried to cover the scar on her lips. They had cut out her tongue, they had stolen her voice, and they had named her a liar to her people. She sat in silence, yet her eyes spoke louder than words. They glowed faintly under the dim lights, carrying pain and a truth no one wanted to hear. Everyone called her the Silent One. But she had not always been silent. She had once spoken of danger, of shadows moving in the sky. She had tried to warn them, but the rulers had declared her a traitor. They said her words were lies that could break the unity of the colony, and for that, they punished her. A human mechanic named Elias had arrived at the colony only weeks earlier. He was not a soldier, not a politician, only a man with oil-stained hands and eyes that noticed small things. He came to fix engines, broken gates, and the machines that powered the alien settlement. He was hired because humans had a strange way with machines. They could make them breathe again when no one else could. One evening, while carrying tools through the prison corridors, Elias saw her. The guards walked past her as if she were already dead, but Elias paused. He noticed the way her eyes followed every sound, the way her fingers traced invisible symbols on the floor. It was not madness, it was memory. She was trying to speak without words. Elias slowed his steps. He studied the scar on her lips and the fire in her gaze. Most humans would have turned away, but something inside him stirred. Perhaps it was pity, perhaps it was anger at the cruelty, or perhaps it was something deeper. He had always believed machines could not lie. They either worked or they broke, and when he looked at her, he felt the same. Her silence was not the silence of a liar. It was the silence of truth being buried. Days passed, and Elias returned to the prison again and again under the excuse of fixing the energy locks. He began to watch her more closely. She scratched patterns on the dusty floor. She tapped her chains in rhythms. At first, they looked meaningless, but Elias began to recognize a sequence, like gears turning inside a clock. Her movements formed a code. One night, when the guards grew lazy, Elias risked a closer step. He crouched near her cell, lowering his voice. "Are you trying to say something?" he whispered. Her eyes widened, then softened with relief. Slowly, she dragged her finger across the ground, drawing a shape like a circle with lines cutting through. Elias frowned. He had seen that same pattern burned into the wings of damaged colony drones he had repaired earlier. A chill ran through him. She was not inventing tales. She was warning them of something real. The scars on her mouth were proof of how much they feared her truth. Elias realized the rulers had silenced her not because she lied, but because she spoke of a danger they did not want anyone to know. He leaned closer. "You're not a liar, are you?" he said quietly. She looked at him, her eyes wet, and shook her head slowly. The chains rattled, echoing through the empty hall. In that moment, Elias felt the weight of her silence pressing against him. It was not only her burden anymore, it was his. Outside, the neon towers flickered again, as if the sky itself trembled. Elias turned his head toward the horizon, where faint shadows moved far above the clouds. He thought of the symbol she had drawn, the broken machines, the strange warnings buried under silence. He felt a knot of fear tighten inside him, but also a spark of determination. This was no longer about fixing engines. This was about fixing the truth. And for the first time since arriving at the colony, Elias knew he had walked into something far larger than himself. Elias could not sleep that night. The face of the silent prisoner haunted him, her scarred lips, her trembling hands, the circle she had drawn on the ground. All of it spun inside his mind like gears grinding against each other. He tried to close his eyes, but each time he saw the flicker of lights in the colony towers, and he wondered if the shadows above the clouds were real. The colony was a strange place for a human. The aliens were taller, with skin that shimmered faintly under the artificial light. They spoke in a language filled with sharp tones, and most of them looked at Elias as if he were a tool himself, useful but unworthy of trust. He fixed their broken gates, repaired their leaking pipes, and kept the power flowing through their machines, yet no one spoke to him beyond orders. No one except the silent girl with her burning eyes. The next day, Elias walked through the lower levels of the colony with his tool belt heavy around his waist. He was called to repair a series of drones that had fallen from the sky. The wrecks were stacked in the workshop, their wings twisted, their circuits charred. As he worked, he noticed the same circle again, faintly marked on the metal shells, a symbol etched like a warning sign. His hands froze, the same mark she had drawn in the dirt, the same shape that now glowed faintly across the broken machines. Elias bent closer, tracing the symbol with his finger. It was not a natural crack or burn, it was deliberate. He checked one drone after another, and the mark appeared again and again. Whoever had attacked them had left this sign behind, and she had seen it. That was why they called her a liar. That was why they silenced her. He felt anger boiling in his chest. He wanted to shout at the guards, to drag them down to the workshop and show them the proof. But he knew what would happen if he did. They would not believe him. They would call him corrupted by her silence, and perhaps they would cut his tongue too. Humans were tolerated, not respected. In this colony, he had no power, only his hands and his machines. That night, Elias returned to the prison. He moved carefully, pretending to check the energy locks as the guards stood half asleep. He slipped closer to her cell. His voice was low. "I saw it," he whispered. "The circle. On the drones, you were telling the truth." Her eyes widened, glowing brighter under the dim light. For a moment her chained hands clenched as if she wanted to reach for him. She tapped her chain against the wall in a rhythm, slow and steady. He listened carefully. The sound repeated like a pattern, a message in code. Elias frowned, then tried to copy the rhythm with his fingers on the metal floor. She nodded quickly, her face filled with relief. The mechanic began to understand that she was not just warning him. She was teaching him a way to speak with her, a way to share the truth without words. Over the next few days, each time he passed, they exchanged patterns of taps and scratches. Each time he learned more. She told him of ships in the sky, of leaders who knew the danger but chose silence. She told him they had called her a liar to protect themselves from fear, not from falsehood. Elias felt his blood grow cold as he pieced the story together. The fleet above the clouds was not just a rumor. It was real, and it was waiting, and the leaders of the colony wanted their people blind, wanted them obedient. They cut out her tongue not to punish lies, but to bury the truth forever. Elias stood by her cell one evening, his voice barely above a breath. "If what you say is true, then they will all die without warning." She looked back at him with eyes that begged him to act. Her silence was louder than any words he had ever heard. But what could a mechanic do? He was no warrior, no leader. He was a man with tools, grease on his hands, and a heart that refused to look away. Yet in his chest, a small fire began to burn, the fire that told him he could not walk away anymore. That night, as he returned to his quarters, Elias made a choice. He would not leave her truth buried in silence. He would not allow the colony to sleep under false safety. He would find a way to finish her warning, even if it cost him everything. The shadows in the sky grew darker. The neon towers flickered again, and somewhere deep inside the prison, the girl who had been silenced closed her eyes with a fragile hope. For the first time since her punishment, she believed that someone might carry her voice into the world again. The days in the colony grew heavier. The air felt thick with secrets, and Elias carried them all in silence. He repaired engines, patched leaking pipes, and tuned broken machines. But in his mind he carried the image of her scarred lips and her eyes begging him to act. Every night he returned to the prison under the excuse of checking energy locks. The guards barely noticed him anymore. Humans were not seen as threats. They were only workers. So Elias slipped through the shadows, tapping codes on the wall, scratching marks on the dust, piecing together the story she tried to share. The story came slowly, one fragment at a time. She had been a scientist once, respected among her people. She had studied the skies, tracked the patterns of ships beyond the colony's reach, and she had seen something that terrified her, a fleet, vast and silent, moving through the void with a purpose. The same fleet that left its mark on the drones, the circle burned into their wings. She had warned the leaders, she had stood before them and told them of the danger. But fear of panic ruled their hearts. They silenced her instead, branding her a liar, cutting out her tongue, and locking her away. They thought if the truth was hidden, then the fear would vanish. But the fleet in the sky did not vanish, it only grew closer. Elias listened to her story with his chest tightening. He was no soldier, no hero, but he could not escape the fire rising inside him. She had been punished for courage, and now the fate of the colony balanced on whether he would find the same courage. One night she scratched a new shape into the dirt. It was not just a circle this time. It was a map, crude and broken, but Elias recognized it. He had seen the same star patterns on navigation screens in the workshop. She pointed to a spot near the colony's orbit, tapping again and again. The fleet was not far. It was waiting, hidden in the dark. Elias's hands shook as he traced the map. He looked at her, his voice low. "They are already here, aren't they?" She nodded slowly, her eyes filled with a sorrow that words could never capture. The next day, Elias carried the memory of that map with him as he worked. His heart pounded as he repaired a damaged generator in the control room. Around him, the leaders spoke in hushed tones. They laughed and smiled for the citizens, pretending all was well. But Elias could see the fear in their eyes. They knew. They always knew. And they had chosen lies over truth. That evening, Elias sat in his small quarters, staring at his tools. The weight of choice pressed down on him. If he spoke, they would silence him as they had silenced her. If he stayed quiet, the fleet would come, and the colony would be unprepared. He thought of her scar, of her desperate eyes, and he knew there was no turning back. He returned to her cell again that night, crouching low so the guards would not see. "I cannot do this alone," he whispered. "I need proof, something more than a map scratched in dust, something I can show them." She blinked, then slowly reached under the loose stone where she sat. Her fingers pulled out a small device, hidden and broken. Elias's breath caught. It was a scanner, its lights dim, its circuits fried. But he could tell it once carried records. She must have hidden it before they dragged her into chains. Elias took the device carefully, hiding it beneath his clothes. If he could repair it, he might have the evidence to reveal the truth. The thought filled him with fear and hope at the same time. The guards stirred, and Elias stepped back quickly, pretending to check the energy field again. He nodded to her one last time before leaving. She watched him with eyes glowing faintly, as if she were placing her last hope in his hands. That night, Elias sat in the workshop long after the others had gone. The broken scanner lay before him, its circuits shattered, its lights dead. He whispered to himself as his hands worked, "Machines don't lie. If I can fix you, you will speak her truth." Sparks danced under his tools, wires hissed, and slowly the scanner flickered, weak but alive. When the screen lit up, Elias saw it. Faint images of the fleet, vast ships hidden in the dark, recorded by her scans, the evidence she had risked everything to reveal. His chest tightened. He knew what he held was more than proof. It was a weapon against lies. But even as the screen glowed, footsteps echoed outside the workshop. Elias quickly covered the device, his heart racing. If the leaders discovered him, both he and the silent girl would vanish forever. The truth was alive now, pulsing in his hands like a flame. But flames could burn as well as save. And Elias knew the real danger had only just begun. Elias kept the broken scanner hidden beneath his bed, wrapped in a cloth. Its faint glow haunted him each night, calling him back. He could not stop thinking about the images it showed, the fleet drifting in the shadows of space, massive and waiting. He knew this was the truth the rulers feared, the reason they silenced her. Each day he worked as if nothing had changed. He repaired the colony's machines, tightened bolts, oiled gears, and replaced circuits. But his mind was always on the scanner and on the girl in the prison. He wanted to show her the machine was alive again. He wanted her to see that her warning had not died. One evening, he returned to her cell with shaking hands. He crouched near the bars, tapping the code they had built between them. She lifted her head slowly, eyes tired but still glowing with that fragile fire. Elias pulled the scanner from beneath his coat, its dim light flickering across the stone floor. Her eyes widened, and her chained hands clenched tight. She tapped the chain fast, over and over. He understood. She was asking if he had seen it. He nodded, whispering, "Yes, I saw them. You were telling the truth." Tears filled her eyes, rolling silently down her cheeks. She leaned closer, her lips scarred, her voice gone, but her silence carried a power that shook Elias's chest. In that moment, the trust between them burned brighter than the prison lights. She had given him her secret, and now he carried it. But danger grew. The guards had begun to notice his long visits. They muttered among themselves, Asking why a human mechanic needed to check the locks so often, Elias forced himself to work faster, tapping fewer codes, sharing shorter words. He knew their time was running out. One night, while repairing a damaged water pump near the command hall, Elias overheard voices. The rulers sat inside, cloaked in shimmering robes, their words low but sharp. The fleet waits above, but the people must never know. One voice hissed. Fear would tear the colony apart. We control them with silence. Let the human fix our machines, but keep him blind. If he learns too much, he vanishes. Elias froze, his heart pounding. They already suspected him. He stepped back quickly, pretending to tighten a bolt, but inside his chest a storm raged. They would not only destroy the girl if the truth came out, they would destroy him too. That night, Elias returned to her cell once more. His voice was rough. They are watching me, he whispered. I don't have much time. If I try to show this, they'll kill us both. But if I don't, the fleet will come, and everyone will die. She tapped her chains, slow and steady, repeating the same pattern until Elias understood. She was telling him to be careful, to survive, to wait for the right moment. But Elias shook his head, his hands clenched around the scanner. There may not be a right moment. We have to make one. The next days became a game of shadows. Elias hid the scanner inside broken equipment, carried it from workshop to workshop, and worked on strengthening its signals. If he could connect it to the main grid, the whole colony would see the truth at once. It was the only way, but the risk grew each hour. Guards followed him now, their eyes narrow, their hands close to their weapons. The silent girl grew weaker in her chains. Each night, Elias brought scraps of food and water, slipping them through the bars. She ate with trembling hands, eyes always fixed on him. Her trust gave him strength. He told her with his taps and scratches that he would not fail her, not this time. One evening, the scanner flared brighter. The repairs were nearly complete. The screen showed the fleet again, closer now, drifting above the clouds like shadows of giants. Elias's breath caught. They were moving. The time for silence was ending. But as the light glowed, footsteps thundered outside. The door to the workshop opened. Guards entered, their eyes sharp. What are you working on, human? One demanded. Elias quickly shoved the scanner under a pile of wires. His hands shook, but he forced a smile. Just repairing old circuits, he said. They stared at him for a long moment before leaving. Their suspicion had deepened. Elias sat in the dark after they left, his heart pounding. He knew the walls were closing in. The rulers would not let him play with machines forever. They would come for him soon. That night, he returned to her one last time before making his choice. He pressed his hand against the cold bars, whispering, I cannot hide anymore. If I do, we lose everything. Trust me. Her eyes met his, filled with both fear and faith. She tapped her chains once, twice, slow and steady. It was her way of saying she believed in him. Elias nodded. He tucked the scanner under his coat and walked into the night. His path was set. The truth had to be freed, no matter the cost. And somewhere in the skies above, the first glimmers of the fleet shimmered through the clouds, drawing closer with every silent hour. The night was colder than usual. The neon towers of the colony flickered like dying stars. Elias walked quickly, his coat heavy with the hidden scanner pressed against his chest. He felt every step echo through his bones. The truth inside the device burned like a flame. Too dangerous to keep hidden, too dangerous to show openly. He returned to his quarters and locked the door. His trembling hands pulled out the scanner. The dim blue lights spread across the walls. The screen came alive, showing images she had recorded. Vast shapes drifting in the black sea of space. Ships larger than mountains, their hulls marked with the same circle. The fleet was real, and they were waiting. Elias stared at the images with clenched fists. This was proof. This was the weapon he needed. But fear whispered in his mind. If he tried to reveal it, the rulers would silence him as they had silenced her. If he failed, the truth would vanish with him. He thought of her scar, of her eyes that begged him to be her voice, and he knew he could not let fear win. Elias spent the next days hiding the device inside broken machines while working. He carried it piece by piece to the main workshop, connecting it to stronger circuits. The plan formed in his mind. If he could link the scanner to the colony grid, its images would appear on every screen, in every hall, in every tower. The people would see the truth with their own eyes. No lie could bury it then. But the risk was sharp. The guards followed him more closely, watching every move. They asked questions. Why do you wander the lower halls, human? Why do you always carry extra tools? Elias forced smiles, muttered excuses, but inside he felt the noose tightening. At night he returned to her cell, his voice low as he tapped against the bars. I can show them. I can make them all see. Her eyes widened. Her chains rattled as she nodded, tapping fast, urging him on. She believed in him, and that belief gave him the strength he needed. Finally, the night came when the scanner was ready. Elias stood alone in the workshop, wires spread across the floor, sparks dancing like fireflies. He had linked the device to the main power grid. If he pressed the switch, the entire colony would see the images, the fleet drifting above them, the truth that had been buried. But footsteps echoed again, heavy and fast. The doors slammed open. Guards stormed inside. Their leader's eyes burned with suspicion. What are you building, human? He demanded. Elias stood frozen, his hands trembling over the switch. The scanner's glow flickered behind him, half hidden by wires. Elias forced a laugh. Just repairing circuits, he said. But the words felt hollow. The guards moved closer, their eyes sharp, their hands rested on their weapons. The truth was seconds from being destroyed. Elias made his choice. His hand slammed down on the switch. The workshop roared with light. The scanner's images burst across the walls, flooding every connected screen in the colony. Towers lit up with the sight of the fleet, massive ships drifting in the void, their hulls scarred with the circle. The people stopped in the streets, staring at the sky brought to life on every display. Whispers rose, gasps followed, and panic trembled at the edges of silence. The guards shouted, rushing forward. Elias was thrown to the ground, fists and boots striking him. But the images did not vanish. The truth spread like fire. The Silent One's warning was alive again. Far away in the prison, she lifted her head. The glow of the images reached even her dark cell. Tears filled her eyes as she pressed her chained hands together. For the first time since they cut her tongue, her voice was heard through the truth that Elias had freed. The rulers gathered in their halls, their voices filled with rage and fear. Shut it down, they screamed. Silence the human, destroy the device. But the people had seen, and once seen, the truth could not be unseen. Elias lay on the ground, blood on his lips, the guards dragging him away. Yet even in pain, he smiled. He had done it. He had given her voice back to the world. But in the skies above, the fleet began to move. The silence of space was breaking, and the true danger was only just arriving. The colony was no longer silent. After Elias triggered the device, the truth had poured across every screen. The images of the massive fleet burned into the eyes of every citizen. Some screamed in fear, some fell to their knees. Others shouted in anger. For the first time, the people realized they had been lied to. The rulers tried to control the chaos. Their voices thundered through the loudspeakers, calling it false, calling it sabotage. But the people had seen the same mark that haunted their broken drones. The circle carved into metal. They knew the fleet was real. The rulers lie shattered like glass under a heavy hammer. Meanwhile, Elias was dragged through the corridors by guards. His body ached from their blows, but inside he felt a strange strength. The truth was free, and that meant he had won a part of the battle. Yet as he was thrown into a dark cell, chains snapping shut around his wrists, he realized this was not victory. It was only the beginning. Across the colony, the Silent One felt the tremors of change. The people whispered her name now. They remembered the girl who had been punished for lies. They began to understand she had been punished for truth. In her dark cell, she closed her eyes, a tear slipping down. Her silence had finally reached the ears of the colony. But the danger was not only within. In the skies above, the fleet moved closer. The scanners glowed brighter with new signals. Elias had seen it before the guards pulled him away. The ships were shifting formation. The waiting was ending. They were preparing to strike. The rulers gathered in their hall, fear wrapped in pride. We must hold the colony in order, they said. The fleet will not dare attack. They only watch. But their words trembled, and their hands shook. They had built their rule on silence, and silence had failed them. In his cell, Elias pressed his head against the wall. He thought of the Silent One chained in her chamber. He thought of the people panicking in the streets. He thought of the fleet that drew nearer with every passing hour. He whispered to himself, "Machines don't lie, and neither did she. They will learn the truth, but will it save them, or will it destroy us all?" The guards spoke outside, their voices sharp. "The human must be executed. If he breathes, he spreads more fire." Elias closed his eyes. He knew his time was short. Yet even in that darkness, a spark of hope burned. If the people rose, if they demanded answers, maybe the rulers could not silence them all. That night, in the lower levels, whispers spread like wildfire. Citizens gathered in secret, telling each other what they had seen. Some spoke of rebellion, others of escape. A few brave ones said the human had given them courage. "If he risked his life to show us, then we must risk ours to act," one said, and so the colony stirred. The Silent One was visited by a guard, his eyes softer than the others. He slipped a piece of bread through the bars, whispering, "They fear you more than the fleet. I don't know what to believe anymore, but I think you were right." Then he left quickly before others saw. She held the bread tightly, her eyes glowing with faint hope. Not all hearts were lost. Far above, the fleet shimmered in the void, engines rumbling like thunder waiting to break. Elias thought of that sound even from his cell. He knew it would come soon. He thought of her, the girl with no voice, and wondered if he had the strength left to protect her when the storm arrived. The rulers grew desperate. They ordered soldiers to prepare, not against the fleet, but against their own people. They feared rebellion more than invasion. They chose to fight silence with blood. Elias was dragged once more from his cell, beaten and broken. He was taken past the streets where the people stared at him. Some whispered his name. Some reached out hands before soldiers pushed them back. In their eyes, Elias saw something powerful. Faith. He realized they did not see just a mechanic anymore. They saw the one who had carried the Silent One's truth. The guards chained him in the main square, preparing for execution. The rulers declared, "This human spread lies. He tried to weaken us before the enemy arrives. His punishment will restore order." But the people did not cheer. They stood in silence, watching, their eyes burning with anger. Elias lifted his head despite the pain. His voice cracked but strong. "She told the truth, and you cut out her tongue. You tried to bury her warning, but you cannot bury the stars." The crowd stirred, whispers rising like a wave. The rulers shouted, trying to silence him, but their voices were drowned by the people's growing roar. The spark had become fire, and the colony was ready to burn away its chains. And in the sky above, the first lights of the fleet pierced the clouds, shining like the eyes of giants who had finally chosen to descend. The square burned with noise, not from weapons, but from voices. The rulers shouted for order. Their soldiers raised their rifles, but the people pressed closer, whispering, roaring, crying. The truth had torn open a wound that could not be closed again, and in the center of it all stood Elias, chained and beaten, yet with his head high. Above the colony, the sky split with light. The fleet emerged, colossal ships breaking through the clouds. Their hulls glowed like black stone kissed by fire. The circle mark carved deep across their sides. The ground shook as engines thundered. The people gasped in terror, but they no longer turned to the rulers for comfort. They turned to the human who had shown them the truth. The rulers panicked. Their voices cracked as they ordered soldiers to fire on the crowd. "Silence them before the fleet strikes," they cried, but the soldiers hesitated. Many of them had families in the crowd. Many had seen the images. The fear in their hearts was no longer fear of the people. It was fear of the sky. In the prison, the Silent One trembled as the ground rumbled. Her chains rattled against the wall. The glow of engines above reached even her cell. She closed her eyes, praying her truth would not die with her. Elias felt the cold steel of a blade press against his throat. The guard raised it high, ready to end him. The ruler's eyes shone with desperation. But then a sound broke the silence, a single cry from the crowd. She was right. Another voice followed. "The human showed us." Then dozens, then hundreds. "Truth, truth, truth." The chant rose like thunder, louder than the fleet itself. The guard hesitated, his hand shaking. He looked at Elias, then at the crowd, and finally he dropped the blade. The rulers screamed in rage, but it was too late. The people surged forward. Soldiers laid down their weapons. Some joined the citizens. Others fled. The square erupted into a storm of rebellion. Chains snapped. Elias was pulled free by trembling hands. He staggered, bloodied but alive. Voices surrounded him, urging him on. Find her, free her, they cried. He stumbled through the streets with the crowd at his back. They reached the prison gates, broke them down with their bare hands, and rushed through the halls. The Silent One looked up as the door to her cell burst open. For a moment she thought it was another guard come to hurt her, but then she saw him, Elias, broken, scarred, yet alive. His hands reached for her chains, tools clattering as he forced the locks open. Her bonds fell away. She collapsed into his arms, silent tears streaking her face. Elias whispered, "You're free, and they will hear you now." She could not speak, but her eyes glowed with fire. Her silence had become the voice of the people. The rulers tried to flee to their towers, but the rebellion spread faster than fire. The people stormed the halls, tearing down banners, shattering symbols of power. No chain could bind them anymore. For every word the rulers had silenced, 1,000 voices now rose. But above, the fleet descended closer. Shadows swallowed the colony. Engines roared like storms. The people trembled, but they no longer bowed in silence. They looked to Elias and the Silent One, waiting. Elias lifted the scanner high, its light flickering. He turned it toward the sky, sending its signal out again. The fleet's massive ships blinked in answer. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. Then the largest ship halted above the colony. Its lights dimmed, and a voice echoed from its speakers. The truth has been spoken. The lie has ended. The Silent One gripped Elias's arm, her eyes wide with shock. She tapped a single rhythm against his hand. He understood. The fleet was not only an enemy. It had waited for the truth to break free. It had tested the colony. It had wanted to see if fear or courage ruled them, and now it had the answer. The ships turned slowly, engines blazing, and drifted back into the clouds. The ground stilled, silence falling over the colony once more. But it was no longer the silence of lies. It was the silence of awakening. The people stood together in the square, looking at Elias and the freed girl. She could not speak, yet her presence roared louder than any leader. They had silenced her once, but now she was the heart of their freedom. Elias stood beside her, exhausted, battered, yet unbroken. He whispered, "Machines don't lie, and neither do the brave." The crowd erupted in cheers, voices rising to the heavens. For the first time, the colony was not ruled by fear, but by truth. And the galaxy itself would remember that one human mechanic had given voice to the silent, and in doing so, he had changed everything.